Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the new home of power mining analysis. In today's episode, Anthony Power and I are going to be dissecting the recent plunge we've seen in the price of Bitcoin and its impact on the Bitcoin mining stocks. In addition to that, we got news out from Soluna, Hut 8, and Riot over the weekend, so we wanted to talk about that as well in today's presentation. Now, before we get into that, please take a second, smash the like button, you guys. Big help to myself and the channel. Anthony loves it. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below how you're feeling in terms of your positions here, if you think Bitcoin has more room to the downside, or if you think we're starting to find the bottom. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so that's right. Today's video, we got Anthony Power back, well rested after the weekend. We've got some big news articles that came out, Anthony. The sector was a little quiet eerily quiet over the last few weeks. So we finally got some news. We're going to talk about that in today's presentation. Soluna, Hut 8, and Riot officially responding to Bitfarms. So a lot going on there. But before we get into that, Anthony, the Bitcoin price itself has continued to nosedive over the weekend. I've been seeing rumors of nation states and large whales dumping their Bitcoin, all kinds of things coming to fruition here in terms of trading on the Bitcoin side. However, as we were just talking about, the share price in a lot of the Bitcoin miners is actually holding up relatively well this morning. So why don't we start off there, Anthony? What's your take on the pullback in the price of Bitcoin?
Bitcoin just doing what it normally does. It's it's up and down. We talked about the reasons at the weekend. So there's been some selling. The miners have been selling, but you still got the ETFs. You still got that other chap, Michael Saylor, his name is, I think, is, and he's buying a bundle of Bitcoin. I don't know. He's got now in the company, but it's well over 220,000. So he's relentless. He's just constantly buying. So I just look at these days and think, we've been there before. It's still in this 60,000, 65,000, where it's been for like over 3 months now. So it reached a high this year of about 74,000 back at March the 13th. And yeah, it's pulled back a little bit from there, but this is nothing to be surprised about. If you've been through a couple of halvings, you'll know that these volatile days occur with regularity. So I'm sort of like fairly immune to it, as long as you've got the long-term view where you believe Bitcoin's going to be. These are just days that you just take in your hand. I mean, if it's going to go to 100,000, 150,000, and double or treble from where it is at the moment, don't worry when it drops 3 or 4%. You've equally got to accept those days as well. So, as I say, we've seen a sort of like a decoupling now the other way. If you looked at the first 3 months of the year with the Bitcoin price and the miner prices, take out CleanSpark because of that massive growth they had in hash rate. All the miners were down for those first 3 months. If you look at it since March the 13th, it sort of like shows you a different picture actually. And I did a little table earlier today, and if we just take the share prices on the 13th of March, the Bitcoin price since then has dropped about 16%. But the miners, you can look at IREN's up 170%, Core Scientific 165, Wolf 140, Hut 69%. So there's been some sort of like significant movement, and actually only about 3 or 4 of the miners are in negative territory. Those are CleanSpark, Marathon, Hive, and Riot. So all the other miners are actually positive in that period that the Bitcoin price has been pulling back. So we talked about 3 months ago why the miners decoupling from the Bitcoin price. Well, now it looks the other way around. It looks like the miners are taking off, and we had a chat earlier about what are the current positives in the market space, and a lot of it's to do with the HPC contracts that some of these miners have got there. And if you think about those miners that have done really well lately, so Core Scientific, massive deal. IREN have a deal with Poolside and looking to grow HPC over the next few years in their facilities. TeraWulf moving into the market. Those three companies are all looking at AI and HPC, and their share prices are sort of starting to reflect
And
that.
and
The companies
interestingly
that
enough,
aren't.
Anthony, on the flip side, the three you named that are down, CleanSpark, Riot, Marathon, you know where I'm going with this. Those are all the full-fledged pure play miners. So we exactly right.
So it's to take it with a pinch of salt, but I mean, we've spoke many times in the last week or so now about what those analysts were saying back in Dallas, and the way they saw the picture, which is not necessarily the way that the retail investors see the picture. So these are the highly paid analysts from Wall Street, who cover these companies and are there to sort of accurately, from their position, analyze them and give their potential share price growth. And it was obvious the number of analysts that turned up at Denton to see Core Scientific compared to the following day at Corsicana, that HPC was the highlight in that space at the moment. So we probably had nearly twice as many analysts on the first day.
Well, and what's nice now, Anthony, is we were actually joking about this beforehand. If the price of Bitcoin goes up, the miners do well. If the price of Bitcoin goes down, they fall back on the HPC. So it's nice in that respect. I actually took advantage to pick up some additional Bitcoin myself over the weekend and made a couple trades in the personal account as well on the Bitcoin mining front. So speaking of trades and individual accounts, Anthony, one trade that you've been talking about a lot is Soluna, and just relatively how unknown this company is compared to some of the others we cover on the channel, specifically highlighting the fact that a lot of those analysts you referenced on the tours were unfamiliar with Soluna. Now, lo and behold, Soluna came out with some pretty big news this morning. We have John actually coming on, the CEO, John Belizaire, coming on the channel next week. So that's great timing to get more information about this. But why don't you walk us through this news this morning, Anthony, and how this impacts your thesis on Soluna?
Yeah, so I've talked about Saluna the last couple of podcasts, and it's really one of those, in terms of market capitalization, it's the smallest miner that we actually look at the moment. Although that, I probably need to relook now because the share price has increased over 100% in the last few months. So it's had a massive rise, and there's been lots of good news with regards to certain projects. So Project Dorothy 2 received its funding of about 30 million. Project Catty, where there's 166 megawatts of power available for that project. That's looking for a partner now. And then today they announced they've got now some funding, 12.5 million of funding through a credit facility to create this new subsidiary called Saluna Cloud. And it's effectively where they're going to start launching their cloud service. So that they're going to purchase the NVIDIA 100 GPUs under a 3-year managed service agreement at one of the hydropower data centers. And the potential revenues from this can be anything between 16 and 26 million a year. And the contract over 3 years, that can be anything from 38 to 80 million dollars. So this is, for a company that market capitalization last week was a little over 20 million. This is massive news. And John's been on the program, on the podcast, a number of times this year, and has been articulating about these types of contracts that they're looking at. And that since he's been in the chair for 12 months, we've seen a change now in the number of projects. They've got things in order. They've got their self-mining. They've got the hosting agreements. They've got this access to cheap power under 3 cents a kilowatt hour. They're looking at the HPC now. They've now got the funding to go out and do that, and they'll pay that 12.5 million back in a sort of a smaller way than the likes of what Core Scientific are doing with CoreWeave. They're getting their capital payment up front. They're paying it back. So I think Soluna have got the option to pay this back over, I think, the first 5 years, and even then they could probably extend it longer. But it's going to bring in some nice revenues, potentially up to 80 million. So that's over 3 years. That's again, for a company's size, this is just one of their revenue streams, not all their revenue streams. So this will be quite significant, because we talked about what the revenue streams were looking like without HPC, and they were quite good for 2024, 25, and 26. And now with this coming in now, depending on the start date, when they can get things sorted out, it looks like it'll probably be more towards the end of this year or beginning of 2025. And yeah, it's a great opportunity.
Well, and it seems to be now just another domino starting to fall in this HPC shift we've seen. And Anthony, I remember a year ago, we started talking about some of these companies getting into the HPC space, and it was really a question mark at that point, whether it was the right move or not. And now 12 months later, it definitely, hindsight is 2020. Now, speaking of early movers, Hut 8 Mining at this point in time actually got into the HPC space in a big way. They signed Interior Health, which is a major healthcare client in British Columbia, back before the merger. Now, fast forward to Hut 8 Corp, now that they've joined with US BTC, and they just came out with another big announcement today, Anthony, again, moving in the direction of HPC AI. So why don't we shift gears? Why don't we talk about that announcement?
Yeah, so they've managed to, announce 150 million investment from Coatue Management through a convertible note, and that this company's realizing that Hut 8 have got real good potential in the AI compute capacity. They've been operating this already. One of the early miners had moved into this, and moved into it because they bought 5 data centers, and also they had all these GPUs from the Ethereum mining days. So they were sort of like, in terms of preparing for this, they were preparing before some of these big names that we've talked about in recent weeks, who are actually now delivering big contracts. So this is great to hear. We're going to get Sue on this week to talk us through more about what this is. So we're not going to steal that thunder there. Let her come on the podcast and put some more picture to this story. And but yeah, it's another one of these that Ash has talked about. Judge me coming into Q3. There's things that are happening. You'll get announced as they go through there. This is one of those things that they've announced now, and hopefully we get some more announcements going forward as we go into that period. But yeah, he's expressed his enthusiasm for this partnership, and believes there's a lot of growth in the AI market, and connectivity to this services. So it sounds very positive for Hut. Again, I think we've seen an uptick in the share price today, where some of the miners started in green. The likes of Soluna, the likes of Hut, the likes of Core Scientific are fighting against the red, and are actually in green at the moment. So even though the Bitcoin price is down, it looks like the HPC side is getting a little bit of benefit from that.
Well, it definitely is. And interestingly enough, talk about hindsight, when we covered this merger between US BTC and Hut 8 Mining, there was a lot of discussion, Anthony, of whether this was a good deal or not. And I remember us talking about Hut 8's market cap itself had been in excess of $2.5 billion last bull run. When these companies came together at that point in time, it was around $1 billion. But Hut 8, Asher, Sue, Jamie, at the time, they saw the value of this infrastructure. And Hut 8 Corp now has a very, I believe, over 1,100 megawatts of power capacity under contract. So they've got a big portfolio here. And now that this HPC trend is really coming to fruition, I think they're in a pretty good spot, Anthony. And this reminded me, it was very Core-esque, this type of deal, partnering with a big company, $100+ million contract, and looking to really see where that goes. So you're right, Anthony. We've got Sue Ennis back on Wednesday this week. Going to be talking about what's going on at Hut 8 Corp, and obviously this big press release. So we'll get more details there, you guys. But if you have questions specifically for the team at Hut or about this deal, leave them in the comment section below. And then last but not least, Anthony, the Riot Bitfarms saga continues. Riot came out today. They actually rescinded their $2.30 offer for Bitfarms. They've selected 3 candidates, which they feel would be great additions to the board at Bitfarms, really trying to reverse what they consider to be this entrenching move by the existing board at Bitfarms. So curious to get your thoughts on this one as well, Anthony, as we've been covering this closely over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, the Bitfarm share price now is significantly in excess of the offer price, so we can understand why Riot have taken that back. But they've from their position, and this is their position, they've articulated that they weren't happy with how the board dealt with their initial discussions on this particular takeover, and weren't prepared to acknowledge the offer at all. And so they went out and started buying the stock, and they currently own just under 15% of the whole of Bitfarms. And what their aim is, again, this is Riot's aim, is to look to remove the chairman and interim CEO Nicholas Bonter and one of the directors Andre Finkelstein. And they're saying it's due to poor governance and failed leadership. Which was, from their position, it was highlighted by the termination of Jeff Morphy. I mean, Jeff Morphy was CEO for the last few years, was a director initially, became the CEO not long after he joined Bitfarms, during a period where the company had, $160 million of debt. That got whittled down to zero. So, Jeff, with a background of expertise in that sort of, managing that type of issue there, it certainly brought all his skills to the table there. And, they did something that, really, they were so close to probably going into Chapter 11 that, people didn't think they had a chance to recover, but they did. They literally changed their whole way around. They put the reins on the growth. They sold machines that weren't even open; they're in boxes, just to raise capital to pay that debt off. And and I'd say slowly but surely, but that's probably not the correct adjective to use. You'd say it was swift and sure, because it was literally 16, 17 months from 160 million down to zero. So they made a great effort to do that, and then all of a sudden, long after that, you're seeing that the CEO's, got told he's going to be replaced, but until they found the replacement, he was going to stand in. So that news came out, and it wasn't great for the company. I've met Jeff on a number of occasions, and always found him to be very, always happy to have a discussion and talk about the company, and that helps us to get our stuff out, our analysis out, our content out. Nothing like we don't get when we speak to all these CEOs, we're not getting secrets and anything like that. We're just getting an understanding of what's happening there with what's out in the place at the moment. So in the market space at the moment, there'll be a lot of information out there, but it's a case of you can have a chat with the CEO and get his understanding of how he sees the picture currently. And Jeff was always. I met Jeff in Dubai for the first time, then met him in London early this year. And I could see in London he was like, he was disappointed. He was still acting. He was still the CEO, subject to a replacement at that point in time. But you could see that, I could see through his expression, through the way he's talking, he was, was had a bit of angst about the decision, and sometimes, wasn't his decision to leave the company. And then literally, a few weeks after the meeting in London, he was terminated. And then it came out about the offer from Riot. So I don't think there's any connection there. We haven't asked for a comment on that there, and I'm sure later on things will become more apparent. But from Riot's position, they want to propose 3 independent directors. So this will be independent directors: as John Delaney, Amy Friedman, and Ralph Goering. And basically, if they can get those 3 nominees there, they want to try and restore some confidence and corporate, from their perspective. This is Riot's perspective. Restore shareholder confidence and corporate governance. And the other thing, obviously, if they can put 3 independent directors in, and at the same time remove the CEO and one of the other directors, There's only 5 directors, I thought 4 directors at the moment. So, you're effectively putting literally your own team in place. So that'll be interesting to see how that develops. But from Riot's perspective, they'll see it as like, this is beneficial to all shareholders. And we talked about, what would one company look like in terms of the biggest Bitcoin miner operating in, I think Bitfarms are already operating 11 or 12 different facilities at the moment, and Riot have 2 big facilities. The size of that one company, the opportunity to raise capital will be far easier to grow. And you'll have all the synergies of expertise of dealing with Bitcoin mining in various different legislation. So that's something that Riot only operate in the US at the moment, only operate in one state. So operate in Texas, and both facilities are within easy reach of Dallas. So but Bitfarms itself operates in Canada, operates in the US, operates in Paraguay, operates in Argentina. So, although a smaller miner, they've got a more varied experience in dealing with different legislations, and understand that political risk there. So this is going to be, one that will play out for quite a while. I can understand from the Bitfarms and for open and transparency, I own shares in both companies, have done for a considerable amount of time. If it doesn't go ahead, and Riot end up walking away, they've got 15% of the company where the share price has increased significantly, so they walk away with a reasonable profit. At the same time, we've seen the plans for Bitfarms are going to 35 exahash next year. Just want to make sure they can get to the 21 in December. So June is a really important date for them. They've got to achieve 12. They're at 9.5 in terms of what they've got plugged in at the moment. So another 2.5 exahash. This is phenomenal growth compared to what they've previously done. So back in 2022, the target early in that year was 8, and then he had to revise it down to 6. And earlier this year they're only at 6, so it's not like they've grown massively over the last couple of years. But 2024 is like for a number of companies, it's make and break for Bitfarms, and to a certain extent, it's make and break for Riot Platforms. But one thing we've seen is we've actually been to Riot Platforms facility and looked at what they're doing there, and I think we can both agree they will achieve their hash rate target by the end of the year with what we've seen in terms of what they've done in that facility and how they're planning to complete those first 4 100 megawatt buildings.
It did look promising, Anthony, for sure. I did leave feeling very confident in that target. And for me, you guys, as Anthony said, we both own shares in both of these companies. They're both strong players. I think that's evident in the fact that Riot is looking to acquire Bitfarms based on their operational excellence. But to me, the question is still, will 1 + 1 = 3, or are they stronger independently? Time will tell the answer to that, but definitely an interesting story to continue to follow here, Anthony. And I know very polarizing on both sides. We've got people like ourselves that own both companies, relatively kind of happy with whatever outcome. And then we've got people who own one of the two with some very distinct and different opinions. So we'll continue to watch that one. Hopefully we can get Ben back on from Bitfarms to tell both sides of the story. And that's basically it for today's news, you guys. So let us know in the comment section below if you've got any questions. We've got John Belizaire, CEO of Soluna, on next week. And then we've got Sue Ennis, head of IR, on for Hut 8 Corp this week. So a lot of good interviews, very timely. We'll see if the Bitcoin price can recover today, but it looks like the miners are all right. And Anthony, we'll see you in tomorrow's podcast.